It's me, Heather. I am here for your art tutorial today. I'm so glad you're joining me. Today we are going to do these two really awesome vignettes. Vignette is kind of a fancy word for a little painting. We're going to do this painting over here of a nighttime sky in the forest, and then we're going to do this painting of a sunset with palm trees. I love the different colors, and we're going to be using the technique called wet on wet. All right, are you ready? Let's hop in and discover what our materials look like. Okay, for our materials, we have something round. You could use a bowl or maybe a cup. I am using a roll of masking tape for my round stencil. We have some clean water, a thin Sharpie marker. You could also use a black pen maybe, or even a black marker. We should not be getting our marker wet so it won't bleed, so you could use any kind of black marker. Some watercolors, a watercolor brush, and some watercolor paper. All right, let's jump into our tutorial. Okay, for the first part of our tutorial, I'm gonna take my stencil, my round stencil. I'm gonna place it on my paper. I'm gonna take my pen, and I'm going to trace around my stencil. It's okay if it's not perfect because you can cut this out later on. I'm gonna do my other stencil over here. Cool. All right, so I have two stencils on my paper, two circles, and I traced around the circumference of the circle. That's a math word for the perimeter or the area around a circle. We're gonna jump in first with our forest nighttime sky. We're gonna paint the sky on one of them completely. We're gonna let that dry while we're painting the other sky, okay? And then after both of those dry, we're gonna come back on and do our detail work with our Sharpie pen on top. So I'm getting my brush wet with some clean water. Okay, I painted my paper with clear water. Now I'm going to add the color on top of my paper, or on top of my water. I'm gonna get my brush really wet, and I'm gonna start with a light blue. Okay, and I'm gonna start at the bottom of my circle, and I'm just gonna dab that paint onto the circle. I'm gonna avoid my tendency to stroke, and I'm just gonna dab my brush with little hops, okay? After I get my light color on, I'm gonna go in for a medium color of blue. I'm just gonna put it there on top of where that light blue was. And again, I'm dabbing that color on to let it blend into the color below it. The less you think about it, the better it looks. When we get too concerned about the placement of our color when we're doing wet on wet, sometimes we can get a little fixated on what it looks like. Okay, I'm gonna go in with some pink, and I like to just dab a little bit of pink on, not a lot. Tonight, this is a nighttime sky, and the other night I took my kids to the park right before sunset, and I was amazed at how pink the sky was. Then I'm going to add a purple on top. And we want this purple to be really dark. So my forest sky is done. I'm gonna let that dry because the paint's pretty wet on that, and I'm gonna hop on over to my sunset with the palm trees. Clean your brush really good, get all that paint off of it, and we're going to wet that second circle with just Okay, now I'm gonna start adding my color. I always like to add the lightest color first. So I'm gonna go in with a light orange at the bottom of my circle. Then I'm gonna put a medium color orange on top of that. That creates different shades of color. When you're using one color, but you're doing a light or medium or dark shade of it, that is called creating different shades of color. After that, I'm going to put a little bit of pink in my sky. Always remember to clean your brush in between. And then I'm going to top it with some purple. Remember, when you're using watercolors, you're always looking for a real wet brush. You never want your brush to be dry when you're working with watercolor. Okay, all of my color is on. I'm gonna let this dry really good before I go back over it with my Sharpie marker. All right, campers, while our background's dry, I'm gonna show you how to draw our pine trees and then our palm tree, okay? Pine trees really live where it's more of a colder environment. You might see them in the mountains or up north. And sometimes we call them evergreen trees. We're gonna start with our trunk. Pine trees have really tall, skinny trunks. And then we're gonna add our branches by just coming down like this in strokes, all right? And we're really going for a shape that is a triangle. So I did one side, now I'm gonna come down and do the other side. And sometimes I like to do the shape first and then come and fill in with all of those branches, okay? And don't worry if you can see through your tree. That is how the natural tree looks, where you can kind of see the trunk, but then you can see through the branches, okay? So we're just doing little strokes, and I want my tree to be in the shape of a triangle, which I think I did a pretty good job there. We don't want to draw our trunk and then put our branches straight across. All right, this gives us, this doesn't really look like a tree, does it? Nope, we want it to be more like this, okay? So just make sure that your trees look like a triangle when you're doing pine trees. Kind of like a Christmas tree, if you've ever seen a Christmas tree. at a shopping center or out, okay? All right, we're going to draw our pine trees, and then I will show you how to do our palm tree. All right, I have my fine tip Sharpie pen here, and I like to start by drawing all of my tree trunks first. So I'm gonna come in with some tall ones, and some medium ones, and some short ones, and I like to maybe do about 7 or 6 different tree trunks. So you can see where my trunks are. I spread them out over the bottom of my circle. Now I'm gonna go in and add my branches. I'm just gonna use little strokes and pull them down and try to make sure I'm staying in that triangle shape. Okay, I finished my pine trees. I'll show you my finished product, okay? Now I'm gonna move over and we're gonna work on our palm tree. Okay, I'm gonna show you how to draw a palm tree first. It's so easy. You start with kind of a bent trunk to your palm tree, because palm trees are really tall and they sway in the wind. And then I like to call this my floppy X. Almost, it's an X, but it's almost like the X is made out of spaghetti noodles or something. And then I add a V on top. There's the shape of my palm tree. Now I'm gonna put my little branches on each of the limbs of my palm tree. So I'm just gonna pull in strokes, just like we did with our last tree, with our pine trees. I'm gonna pull down in strokes, and this is kind of hard to do as I'm holding it up. I'm just gonna pull those over in strokes. There, to make like they're blowing in the wind. Palm trees are usually in tropical environments, aren't they? I always think of beaches and sand when I see palm trees. And I like to kind of thicken this up just a little bit. It's not super thick. And there you go, you have your palm tree. So you put your trunk, and then you have your floppy X, and then a V on top. And if you're feeling super fun, you can add 1 or 2 coconuts to it. All right, we're gonna draw our palm tree. I'm gonna draw my trunk at an angle. I like to fill my trunk in just a little bit. Then we draw our, what I call our floppy X, kind of like a loose spaghetti noodle, and then a V in the middle. And then after we do that, we're just gonna come and bring those branches down, and it creates a really beautiful silhouette. That means a shadow of a palm tree. So impressed with our work today. We used wet on wet technique to create the skies of both of our images, And then we used our pen or Sharpie marker to create pine trees and a palm tree. I'm so thankful that you were here with me today, and I can't wait for our next tutorial.